You're listening to Second Cut. This is the weekly podcast from thefilmmagazine.com where we discuss topics in film theory and criticism through film reviews and just talking. I'm Jacob, and I'm the one who stole Sam's bit and wore a hat.
I'm Sam. I'm the one having technical difficulties, and you're going to have to trust me when I say I'm also wearing a hat.
I'm Kieran. I'm the other one of the regulars, I guess. The regulars is a movie, isn't it? I swear it is. We've got the Baker Street regulars, at least. So maybe that's a thing.
Sure.
And we have a special guest. Sorry, I should introduce you.
That's okay.
Who are you?
Hello, everyone. My name's George, and I've been invited on today to talk about Westerns. It's an honour to be with the regulars, you know. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited.
Thanks for being here.
This is the first time it's ever been called an honour. Normally when people come on, they go, please, can I see my family now?
When can I leave?
So George is a writer for the Film Magazine, and George, I'm wanting to know, what is a fun fact about you? It could be movie related, it could be anything related, and what are your top 5 favorite movies?
Okay, so fun fact. I grew up in a little village called Goathland, which is, for anyone native to the UK, is near Whitby. They might know that place. But this little village was used to film a TV show called Heartbeat, which is about the police force in the 60s. But more famously, the train station there was used for Hogsmeade Station in the first Harry Potter.
Wow.
And more recently than that, both Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny and the new Mission Impossible filmed stuff on that railway, which my village is a stop at, you know. So basically, since I was a little kid, there's always been some sort of connection to the film industry, which there you go.
Just using your train, essentially.
Basically, yeah. I was never in any of it, but you know.
So it was get into movies or get into trains, and you picked movies.
Which is really funny because my brother actually works on them trains now. So there you go. I went the other route, but yeah.
Cool.
And what are your top 5 favorite? I know we have George's 10 best. You could go check that out. But what are your 5 favorite movies?
Well, because I struggle with that question so much, I decided just to choose the top 5 from that list because otherwise I was, you know, it was an absolute nightmare. So I've got some visual aids as well because I own all these films on Blu-ray.
Visual aids that aren't me pulling a book off a shelf.
Yeah. So at number 5, I'm going to say Memories of Murder, which is included on the Bong Joon-ho box set.
Sam is currently jumping for joy.
It's amazing. It's a fantastic... what would you even call it? It's a detective story, but it's so much it's engrossing. It's it's a very black comedy as well. It's like it is. Yeah, there's
really
some laugh out loud bits mixed in with like
they make police torture funny somehow.
Exactly. Yeah, like it's the most messed up stuff you've ever seen, but it's sometimes hilarious. Go figure. Number 4. I feel like this is such a cliche, and I roll my own eyes at this, but it would be The Godfather. It's a great film. We all know.
Now, Jacob is jumping for joy. You're just doing this for all of us, aren't you?
Well,
you checked our list beforehand.
He's on here to pander.
Up next, I've got some horror film, yeah. I mean, yeah, what can you say? It's a great film. Nothing else needs to be said about it, really, you know. Number 3, Children of Men. Anyone a big fan of that? Yep. Every time I watch it, I think
I can do that.
Okay, there you go.
I've read the book.
Yeah. I think it's Koran's best film, which I know you guys spoke about him last week, right?
Something like that.
Something like that,
yeah. See, there you go. I'm a listener. Great film. Every time I watch it, it blows me away. There's just something about it. Number 2, an obvious choice again, but 2001, Space Odyssey.
Woo! I'll jump for joy at that one.
Hey, I've got a Blu-ray for this. It's actually sealed because I've only ever seen this film in theatrical re-releases. So I'd feel dirty watching it on my TV screen, you know. I'm very fortunate. I've seen it 3 times now in cinemas. But
somewhere David Lynch is smiling.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm watching on my like iPad Nano or whatever, you know. I don't think you can watch anything on that. But anyway,
somehow hook it up to a Pokemon Mini.
Yeah, man, yeah. Look, the true experience, you know. But my favorite film of all time, which is currently the choice. Maybe it'll change next year. Who knows? But that would be The Graduate. I think it's just a fantastic film. I could watch it any time in any mood. I think I find it very relatable as I'm just a graduate recently. So that feeling of being lost, sort of meandering, you don't really know what you want to do. I feel a lot of that. I haven't had an affair with my mate's mum. I haven't gone that far, but other than that, great film. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I had some questions when you said I relate to it.
Yeah, I feel like I had to quickly nip that one in the bud.
I was going to say, are you trying to seduce me?
Oh,
yeah, nice. So yeah, there you go. But there's so many more films that I could have chosen. That's just the easiest way for me to answer that question.
That's fair. And loyal listener Greg is here as well, friend of the show. Hello, Greg.
Greg.
So we're here. Hello.
Should we do it all together, like a barbershop quartet?
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Beautiful. All right. So yeah, we're talking about Westerns, and because I'm the American, I feel like I'm gonna feel entitled to talking about the American context of the Western stories. So the whole idea of westward expansion in America was manifest destiny, that God said it was inevitable. We would move west all the way to California, and it would all be our land. And whoever's on it at that moment in time, well, they got to get out of the way, because we have contracts and we have civilization, and that is how the Native Americans were genocided and forced onto reservations, which is portrayed very heroically throughout the history of Westerns. A lot of early film Westerns up through the 40s were movies that glorified westward expansion, glorified cowboys, very simple narratives, clear-cut good guys, very evil Indians often, and a lot of the time those Indians were not even Indians. They were played by white people, which is still the case in The Searchers, which is the movie I'm going to talk about. But what are y'all's knowledge and impressions of sort of the American myth of the West told through film?
We'll go to the expert first.
George?
So to me, it's really interesting. When I was saying earlier before the show, spaghetti westerns were sort of the first sort of genre I really got into. And before that, I didn't really enjoy or appreciate westerns in general. And I think partly because the idea of the American West was, I think it was, I don't think this now. There's a lot of westerns that I've loved from that sort of era. But to me, it was very clean cut. It's very, typically you'd have good guys in white hats, bad guys in black. And it was very much stories of right versus wrong, justice and stuff like that. Which in a way, a lot of people say now, the superhero genre is going to go the way of the Western. I think there's a lot of similarities between superheroes and Westerns in terms of having these sort of larger than life characters who come into a town and save the day, that sort of thing. So it's a genre really that I've sort of appreciated more and more as I've got older. But I'd say I probably appreciate it more from a technical standpoint, because a lot of the Westerns, I don't know, you think of John Ford stuff, it's really well made. You could tell he's one of the first great pioneering directors, really. But yeah, initially I was put off American Westerns, and that's why I was so into spaghetti Westerns when I was sort of a teenager. But yeah, what about you guys? What do you think?
Kieran, we could. Sam.
Yeah.
I mean, I sort of got into, I suppose, the spaghetti western things first, because my dad's into both classic westerns and more kind of revisionist and more kind of tweaks to the formula kind of things. I remember, I think I watched the Dollars Trilogy. I was quite young, and I watched some of the late kind of revisionist kind of Clint Eastwood stuff following that. And I probably only got into the classic John Ford stuff a lot later, really. And I haven't seen all of it yet. I've seen the Searchers. I've seen think about other classic Western directors as well. Like those classic Westerns. I've seen the Searchers. I've seen My Darling Clementine. I've seen Rio Bravo.
You've seen Stagecoach?
But I've not seen Stagecoach. No. Yeah, I know it's one of those I didn't tick off, and the one my dad always talks about, I definitely need to tick off at some point, is Red River. I've never seen that either.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah. But what I kind of find interesting is how the iconography and the myth making and everything, how that's kind of when it was kind of played out and people were starting to kind of confront it a bit more there at that point. Obviously he took off around the world, and you had like Europeans doing their own takes on the American myth, and then even later on, there's like direct remakes, other languages and stuff. And my favourite thing, which is the culture swapping between East and West. Samurai films become westerns, become samurai films again, and it's a cycle that just happens time and time again. From most obviously Leone, remaking. We're doing an authorized remake of a Yojimbo, to make Fistful of Dollars. A film so unauthorized, he was in court for it. But obviously, Magnificent Seven, coming from Seven Samurai and stuff. But equally, going back, Kurosawa was very influenced by John Ford westerns in terms of his story structure and stuff. So it is like a cycle that's kind of happened time and time again. And that'll be kind of something I may talk about a bit, when I get to my focus film a bit later in the discussion.
Yeah, and I think the Western, a bit like the horror film, like the science fiction film, and this is obviously not including the kind of literature before it and the plays and things along those lines, especially when you get into kind of the talkies and kind of just out of the Great Depression, especially in America. A lot of the genres where we kind of established the tropes of what we've got now in the 30s, 40s, 50s, they're very, I'm going to use the term conservative in their values, that you have a good guy, there is a threat, the good guy comes in, eliminate the threat, and everything returns to normal. You see this again in your westerns with your white hats, your bad hats, very clearly delineated good and bad. Your horror movies, there is a threat from there is an other, and you get the good scientist to banish them away. Science fiction kind of works in a similar way to your horror movies with your aliens from outer space, especially when you get to kind of the 40s and 50s. Roger Corman films like that, and then you get to the 50s, 60s, 70s. And you start to get these people with especially now that the wars are over, with the influences from overseas and the kind of political turmoils that happens, especially, in places like Italy, like Spain and all these other places, where all these genres start to change and they start to get a little less sure of themselves. The footing starts to go out from under. They start to analyze themselves a little bit deeper. Everything's not as cushy as it was before. Not everything is going to return to the good situation that it was. Sometimes you have these very bleak endings, as you were. The Western, you get, especially people like Sam Peckinpah with the Wild Bunch in kind of the late 60s, early 70s, that start to relook at these things. And then I think kind of the 70s, 80s, kind of the Western kind of drops off. You get the odd spurt with things like The Unforgiven, what was Sam Raimi's one that he did in 95? What was it called? I forget. I should know.
Quick and the Dead.
Quick and the Dead, yeah. So you get these odd flashes, and even now you get flashes, News of the World, Dig, The Power of the Dog that are there. But it's not, it's almost like, somebody's doing a Western rather than, it's a Western. It's one of those, and you get the odd kind of little kind of re-experimentation with it. A few years ago, there was a film called The Toll that came out, which was a Western set at like a little toll booth in the middle of rural Wales. Yeah, and it got Michael Smiley.
That was amazing. Yeah, I love that.
It is, yeah, and it just kind of plays on the Western, and all the titles are in kind of the classic Western font, and the shootouts in slow motion, and it's really funny that we're now obviously kind of going, almost playing on the fact that this is a a genre that we know so well, and it is almost kind of anachronistic. It's had its time, it's now gone, and what we've got are elements of the Western in other areas.
You get a lot of sort of like
just here. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say just this year, Kieran. Kieran, I don't know if you'd agree with this. That just this year, Sisu has Western elements. In terms of the kind of the one man against many. Like the Last Stand and everything like that.
Sisu is
iconography.
Sisu, for anyone that hasn't seen it, if I can describe it as a Finnish World War II Western John Wick against the Nazis. It's the best I can describe it. And it's great and it's brilliant, and there's parts which are absolutely ludicrously stupid to a certain degree that you just go, that's not happening, but at that point you're loving it so much and having so much fun that you just don't care that he's kind of climbing up through the landing gear of a plane that's about 1,000 foot in the air after he's been hung and attacked and nearly dead about 5 times in the last day. But it's great fun. But that's definitely a Western. I mean, the whole thing is him trying to keep hold of his big sack of gold nuggets that he's found in the middle of nowhere. So, I
was going to say Logan from a few years ago is very much just a Western, and they're constantly referencing like Shane and stuff. And more recently, Jordan Peele's Nope just becomes a full blown Western, and it's amazing. So a lot of the more recent things like Western adjacent, I'd say.
Yeah, a lot of Nope is about that iconography and where it comes from, and is there kind of a darker side to that kind of appropriation? The idea that the first moving image is a black man on a horse, but we don't know the man's name.
But again, even Nope and Sisu as well. A lot of these Westerns aren't kind of Westerns as we think of them in your classic kind of 40s, 50s black and white kind of your John Wayne's, your Cary Grant, your Jimmy Stewart kind of, rancher kind of let's take care of the Indians. Even something I think the nearest to kind of almost a classical Western I can think of recently that I've seen recently is something like Bone Tomahawk, which kind of in narrative is, the natives have stolen one of our own. We're going to go and get them back. And that's kind of what happens. Yet at the same time, it's really slow and really violent and has one of the most brutal deaths ever put to screen. And it is very much, not kind of the clean cut Western that we're used to, even though the narrative on the surface is fairly similar. And a lot of these films now are just, you would not be able to make a kind of 40s Audie Murphy, 50s Audie Murphy Western now. You just couldn't do it. Or you could, and everyone would rip the hell into you for doing so.
Yeah, another...
it's like...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, George.
I was going to say, like, a lot of them, the ones that look like it's going to be a typical Western now, like The Power of the Dog you mentioned earlier, really that's exploring masculinity and like homosexuality and stuff. Like, they're using that to sort of go deeper than they would ever have gone in the 50s, 60s, in that period.
Even something like There Will Be Blood, which is...
absolutely.
These films now are kind of trading on our knowledge of the Western iconography, but presenting a completely different narrative because they don't have to introduce all these things, because they're kind of... You show a desert and a horse and a hat, and everyone goes, okay, it's a Western, right? We've got some idea of what we're into, and then it can go a different place with them.
Or it's a Marlboro ad.
There you go.
Go Sam.
Just a little sidebar. Do any of you three know what the first Western filmed was and where it was filmed?
Well, I was about to get into that, but yes.
Okay.
It won't be the one I've got in my head is the Great Train Robbery, but it wasn't the Great Train Robbery. That's just the first one, the earliest one I can think of.
Yeah. There's one that was 3 or 4 years before that.
I feel like I should know it, but I can't.
And that was Kidnapping by Indians from 1899. It's 1 minute long, and it was shot in Blackburn, Lancashire. So about 44 miles from where I am.
Yeah, it's a very Western-looking place, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Bleak, nothing there. The people are all savages. Yeah, it sounds about right.
Pretty much.
I think they literally took themselves out into the woods basically, and just put people in costumes and just got some ducks approximated like a kind of a Western kind of landscape. I mean, I think it is briefly referenced in The English. I don't know if any of you guys saw that TV series earlier this year, with Emily Blunt, about these obviously these English migrants, in the States. But at the close of the story, she sort of headed back to England, and they are just start to basically pick up on like these they had like these Western kind of sideshows, kind of cowboys doing tricks and stuff, but they're also like start to film do proper feature films and stuff out in the wilderness in England as well. So it's kind of an interesting little kind of forgotten bit of film history that though it's like an American idea, an American genre, kind of the first films were filmed over here.
Yeah, and then I can just skip over that and go right to Edison and the Great Train Robbery. Which is like longer, obviously, and popularized for the use of like cross-cutting and stuff in it. Although I think there was another shorter film that had cross-cutting first, but it was popular on the vaudeville circuit. It had a lot of money behind it because it was from Edison. So it's something that, like, if you're in film school, you're going to watch it because it's 10 minutes long or whatever.
I think that the one that people remember all of it is just the direct address close up of the shot being fired as the final shot, which is realistically, I probably couldn't tell you a single other shot from that film except that one, because it's now transcended that film. It is just you need a montage of old film clips. You shove that shot in there. It's just one of those that's just kind of shorthand for old film now.
Yeah, and y'all have mentioned it, but in international perceptions of Westerns, the Western is kind of synonymous with John Ford, and we'll see that as we move through these other movies. But John Ford, he was standing up in front of some board during the Red Scare and the blacklisting, and he introduced himself as director of Westerns. Interestingly, he never won an Oscar for, best director for a Western movie, but he's so strongly associated with them. And part of that is just his output over years. His first feature length was a Western. It was called Straight Shooting. It's on YouTube. You can go watch it. I'm pretty sure it's a contemporary music track. So I don't know how much Ford was involved with like creating the music for the original piece, but it's like an hour long, and it's very much similar to the shot compositions that are used in The Searchers. You can watch that movie and watch The Searchers and see the way that he thinks about like how things are arranged in the frame. Are y'all familiar with the story that Steven Spielberg tells about him?
Yeah.
I'm fairly sure I am.
Yeah.
But say it again.
Spielberg going into... Oh, sorry, Sam.
Well, yeah, no, it's just obviously it's referenced at the end of The Fabelmans where you have someone... I still don't really want to spoil The Fabelmans. People haven't seen it.
I was going to say, I still haven't seen it.
John Ford has a scene, the character of John Ford has a scene played by another very famous figure. But essentially, the Spielberg stands in, walks into his office, basically says, I want to make movies like you, Mr. Ford. And he explains like the genius of his kind of shot composition. It's about where you put the, I've forgotten the exact phrasing now, Jake. What was it? It's the horizon, isn't it? Where do you put the horizon?
Yeah, and I don't know how in the film it compares to his story, but it's a lot more terse in the way that that Ford does it.
Yeah, but basically, you if the horizon's above you, if the camera's pointing up or the camera's pointing down, it's interesting. If the horizon's just in the middle, it's boring.
Yeah, what he said in real life, according to Spielberg, was, tell me about this picture. It has Indians. No. Where's the horizon? Okay, tell me about this picture. There's cavalrymen. No. Where's the horizon? And he says, when you know why it's at the top or why it's at the bottom, you can maybe be a pretty good picture maker. Yeah, I mean, Ford just sounds... There's an interview of him with Peter Bogdanovich where he just is really blunt.
it's one of the most cringeworthy, fascinating kind of interviews out there, because Bogdanovich is clearly just a fanboy, just trying to get like a few good quotes for his interview. John Ford's just having none of it. It's just...
Poor
Yeah.
guy.
It's
Yeah.
I think it's hilarious, but I also see the cringeworthy element of it. But yeah, I mean, that's what Ford was. He was a straight shooter. That was sort of the way that he put himself out there, except he didn't call himself an artist, and he refused the label, and he did a lot of his talking through his films. So while he may have been direct, he was also very private. He'd go on his boat and get drunk in between making movies. Just very much a man of his time, and he served in World War II. You know, and obviously he had made silent films. His brother was actually a very big director in early Hollywood before John surpassed him. But he, you know, made movies throughout the teens, 20s, 30s, and, you know, he makes Stagecoach in 1939. That's sort of seen as the first great, you know, studio Western. Now, obviously, there were like the singing cowboy movies, and there were the more romanticized kind of melodrama films. And I'm sure there's stuff I'm leaving out too, but just sort of the big idea of like what's a classic Western. Y'all were talking about like, those don't really appeal to me. They don't appeal to me either. They're super boring. It's the old style Hollywood camera work and blocking and all that I'm like, and it's part of the reason why I just have trouble getting to some older movies in general. But, you know, there's just some you have to go watch. And I think what makes Ford interesting for scholars and critics and fans of movies is that after he served in World War II, his Westerns began to change. And he seemed to be becoming more self-aware of how natives were portrayed. When you watch Stagecoach, the natives are just the bad guys who are outside of this safe, enclosed, settler white environment, who need to shoot them down and have a noble fight against them. They're just bodies to be shot and evil, and that's all they are in Stagecoach. And you know, I didn't get around to watching his 40s and early 50s ones, but from reading about them, he sort of begins to have some self-criticism and criticism of like the American military in some sense, the idea of manifest destiny. He's beginning to cope with that, which finally culminates in The Searchers. And the 50s, at the beginning of the decade, the Westerns and the late 40s as well. Kieran, you're going to love this. They became psychological Westerns. That is what Ford called The Searchers.
I'm out. See it.
I've been thinking about what that means, and obviously this is a debate for another show, but it means that it's about the internal conflict of the characters rather than just the genre pulp story. That's why, like, The Dark Knight is seen as the gritty, realistic Batman, is because it's darker. It's about conflict between the idea of Batman and the idea of his villains and all that. And John Ford was dropping The Searchers in a time where you had seen, oh God, well, now that I'm there, I forget all the names of the 50s psychological Westerns. But the big one that I'm thinking of is Giant, which came out the same year. It got nominations at the Oscars, and The Searchers did not. I went and looked at critic reviews from the 1950s, the one in Variety. It talks about John Ford having confused feelings about his story and his heroes. You know, oh gosh, where's the paragraph that I'm looking for? He feels the girl, blah. Oh, here we go. His bitterness, Ethan, John Ford's character, just John Wayne, God. His bitterness towards the Indians is understandable. They massacred his brother's family except for the kidnapped girl and destroyed the ranch. However, his reaction to the girl when she is finally found seems to be peculiar. He feels the girl has been defiled by Indians during her years with them, and he is determined to kill her. He rides her down, and as she lies helplessly on the ground, he approaches menacingly with a gun drawn. And so this person is talking about, you know, why is John Wayne a bad guy in this movie? They're confused by that. I found a review from Lindsay Anderson in Sight and Sound, where he talks about his disappointment in the story. His search for his little niece seems indeed to be inspired less by love or honor than the obsessive desire to do her to death as a contaminated creature. Now, what is Ford of all directors to do with a hero like this? So that's sort of the perception that The Searchers was having in media. It was released to mixed reviews. People thought it was technically beautiful. And it is. It's a gorgeous movie.
It is.
It was shot in VistaVision, which was a big frame that ran sideways through a camera. It captured more detail, and it allowed for the Monument Valley that he was famous for shooting in to be seen on an epic scale. That I saw somebody say does not hold. I think it was John Milius. He said David Lean and Akira Kurosawa cannot hold a candle to it. And I think that's in part due to the VistaVision. But yeah. So basically what The Searchers is about, there's the beginning of Star Wars, except Obi-Wan is a racist. And so it's
well, there we go. That's it. That's our sound
The
bite.
elevator pitch.
Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru were killed. Their places burned. Obi-Wan Kenobi was secretly in love with Aunt Beru, and he and 1/8 Cherokee Luke, they go off on a journey to find the kidnapped sister. Did George Lucas happen to lift any of this? I don't know.
Nah, pure coincidence.
He's never lifted anything else.
No.
And what makes it special within the context of film history is that it's very dark. It's a really dark movie. John Wayne is super racist in this movie. And in order to, if you're just watching it in 2023, you're not really familiar with the context, you don't know much about John Ford, it looks like a racist movie. And I went and read, it was a chapter in a book called, it's filled with essays. This essay was called Native American Reactions to The Searchers by Tom Grayson Coloness or something like that. Colonesi, I don't know. He wrote, and he's a native, he's from a certain Sioux nation. He writes, "That's what we mean. The Searchers is engaging because it goes further than any other Western of its day in the direction of truth and fairness. But finally, The Searchers was frustrating to us because it stops well short of being truly fair. Ford pushes the limits that apparently existed in 1956 with the portrayal of Indians, Mexicans, and women, which are sympathetic, or at least partially sympathetic, but he doesn't go the distance, not at all." What The Searchers is a negotiation of John Ford's film career, basically. It's a self-criticism, it's a change in view, it's a turn in direction that veers away from the traditional Western narrative, the manifest destiny, the unquestioned heroism of the white cowboys. John Wayne, his public image was as the consummate good guy. There's a zoom in Stagecoach. He rides up on his horse, zooms in on his face. It's handsome young John Wayne, the hero outlaw, romantic outlaw of the movie. Yep, exact. Spinning the rifle.
Beautiful shot, I've got to say. Like, if you watch Stagecoach from nothing else, that one shot, and you just go, this is cinema. You know?
There's a mirror to that shot in The Searchers where he's looking at captives of the Comanche tribe. They're hysterical women, and they say they aren't white anymore, is what he says about them. And the camera zooms in on his face there. He's got the hat down low. There's a shadow over his eyes. The John Wayne that we're watching in The Searchers is very different from the John Wayne in his other Westerns. And it brought out a depth to his filmography, his acting career that people had not seen, and makes him a bit more interesting as a performer. I watched a short documentary where Martin Scorsese was like, how can you say John Wayne's a bad actor after you watch Stagecoach? The Searchers. Even if he's just playing himself, which is what I've seen some people say, he's doing a great job. I think the biggest point of contention with the searchers in modern discourse is the racism. It's not a perfect movie, but he was hiring indigenous actors, not from the right nation. They weren't Comanche. He was paying them money. A union wage is what I read. I mean, it's not perfect, and it's not enough, but it's small victories. Yeah,
a small step for the time, but probably quite significant in the mid 50s.
Yeah, and the writer Arthur M. Eckstein, I mean, he talks about it as a psychological epic. It's one of the first serious adult westerns. And it really does, like, if you watch it, yeah, there are a lot of problems with it, but it does begin to question the narratives of the Western. It builds upon the Western genre cinematically, and it's John Ford's examination of his own career. He would go on to make a movie called Cheyenne Autumn that is much more explicitly, like, not pro-native, because that's not like the right term. I would assume he was sort of pro-native at this point as well, but it's a much more sympathetic, empathetic look at the natives and their displacement as they move to reservations in the U.S. So
I'm going to jump in with 2 points on this, and only two, because otherwise I'll get shouted at for going on 5,000 tangents. One, I think it's interesting. The thing I always remember from the searches is the iconic first and last shots, which I think really, and you know, I see all the time these lists of greatest first and last shots, and they're all from the last 20 years. I'm just like, the searches, come on. You know, it's purely iconic, and that sets it up, I think, for the kind of revisionist stuff and the more serious stuff to come. It opens up from this doorway to this wide world that you think is going to be great, but then it ends with John Wayne not being able to come home. He's still on the doorstep. He will never fully find a place to rest, and I think that's it's not a complete catharsis, which I think it's almost symbolically, kind of visually, where the Western is at the moment is kind of struggling with itself. It's not grounded. It's forever roaming, trying to find where it's going.
And on that, Kieran, real quick, I would say that shot also shows that his views are not welcome so much in modern society anymore. That there's because this is taking place during segregation and the fight to, you know, get rid of it in the U.S.
Yeah.
And then there's a line where one of the women says that, because that's basically what they are the women. There's a line where she says, I don't think this will be a great, or maybe all of our bones need to be in the ground before this can be a better country. And I think that is a statement of the times. Like, people that are racist now probably need to be gone before there can be real change and progress.
And my quick, I was going to say a question on, you were talking about John Wayne just then, and his kind of, you know, first serious role, well, not serious role, but kind of as an actor, we finally get to see, you know, his depths. Do you think he could have done True Grit had he not done this? I mean, it is, you know, sort of decade or so later, so he'd have had the time to get the range, but do you think that his role in The Searchers kind of sets the stage for True Grit, where he is not a great character? You know, he's gambling, he's rude, he's foul-mouthed, he's aggressive, and in fact, when he finally won the Oscar for it, he goes off and collects, I think it's on YouTube, where he goes, you know, if I'd have known that being a drunk, kind of not very nice character would have gotten me the Oscar, I'd have started doing it 30 years ago. Yeah. So do you think that the two are linked?
Yeah, I think there's definitely it's a step on the road to that. I think it's an important element, kind of. Because he couldn't go straight from like being the the flawless hero back in the day, straight to doing something more kind of more critical, like True Grit. I mean, I think was it Roger Ebert who kind of he said something like John Wayne finally won his Oscar for falling off a horse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of at that point. It's almost something like True Grit. It's almost like criticising the kind of roles that John Wayne used to play, and I think The Searchers is kind of somewhere on that spectrum between the 2 points of his career. You know, it's like it's not quite fully kind of confronting kind of the things his character does and the kinds of men he plays, but it's getting there. It's starting to think, oh, maybe this isn't quite the knight in shining armor we thought he was.
Yeah,
George.
I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. I think. Well, I don't know. Do we agree that? Because to me, The Searchers is the most important Western in terms of its effect on the genre. Because I truly don't think you could get true grit without The Searchers, really.
Yeah.
For that reason, it's like the all-American hero.
Yeah.
Being turned on its head almost.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yes, it's not my favourite Western, but yeah, you can't.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't deny its significance, and just that it really did change every kind of Western that came after that, I think.
And I just want to finish it off for me by saying that I think part of the reason it is so respected critically now and in scholarship is because it was not popular. It wasn't as well received as it should have been. It didn't get Academy Awards. People wrote it off as, well, this is just another John Ford Western with a bad story, and I don't understand the Ethan character. He does sort of come to redeem himself a little bit at the end, but throughout it, he's a vicious, terrible person. And I don't think John Ford believed otherwise. I'm sure he was very aware of what he was doing and why he was doing it. So, yeah. Do we have any final thoughts on The Searchers to get out?
If you haven't seen it, go watch it.
Yeah, watch it.
Basically, without The Searchers, none of the other films we're going to be talking about would have existed. So
yeah.
Well, it's good jumping off point to the how the genre kind of mutated over the decades.
And George, one of those mutations was the spaghetti western, and you're going to talk about the greatest of the spaghetti western directors.
Yeah. So before I get into that, just what do we mean by spaghetti western? So in a literal sense, it is a western made by an Italian director, usually shot in Italy or Spain sometimes. And they differ because unlike we mentioned earlier, the sort of American West, which is really mythologized, it's sort of more realistic in the sense that it demythologizes. Is that a word? I don't know. It sort of deconstructs
unmyths.
That. Unmyths, yeah. It sort of unmyths that popularization from American cinema. I think they're grittier, more violent, definitely. They sort of push the boat in what is sort of acceptable on the screen. And there's more morally grey characters. I think compared to, say, like in the sort of American stuff, the main character would be a cowboy or something like that. In a spaghetti western, they're a bounty hunter or something. They can be classed as a villain themselves, but they're the protagonist of the film, if you get me. So obviously the most popular director to come out of this genre would be Sergio Leone. He was born in 1929, and really he was surrounded by film his entire life before he even picked up a camera, because his parents were both sort of legends of Italian silent cinema. I think his dad was a director. His mother was a actress, I believe. He actually met Ennio Morricone, who he would work with on all but one of his films. He met them in school. So that sort of like foreshadowed their friendship and career. Although when Sergio Leone invited Morricone to work on their first film together, Morricone had to remind him that they'd gone to school together, because Leone couldn't actually remember him at all. So once he realized that, I think he was a bit more like, oh, okay, yeah, definitely I'll hire you, Also, he was an assistant to the director on The Bicycle Thieves, which is obviously a very famous film. And that was all before he got his first directing gig, which was actually finishing a film called The Last Days of Pompeii in 1959, after the original director became ill. So that was his first actual go at directing. But his first fully credited directing role was for The Colossus of Rhodes, which is a sort of typical sword and sandal epic about like pre-Roman Empire times. I've not seen that. I can't attest if it's any good or not. I'm sure it is, but from what I hear, from what I've read, it's not as... It's the weakest Leone film, which I think that makes sense. It's not really him doing what he does best, which he did in his second film, which is A Fistful of Dollars, which starts what is the Dollars Trilogy. And And these are, I say trilogy, they're not really connected by a story at all. It's more like thematic. They don't even have the same main character throughout. A lot of people think it is Clint Eastwood's character, the man with no name, is the same character. It's not. And by like
Thank you,
legal
George.
terms,
I agree.
yeah, but like I've done my research to back this up. So the producer of the first film, A Fistful of Dollars, fell out with Leone after that. And when Leone made the second film, that producer tried to sue Leone for reusing a character that he owned. So it went to court, and the producer lost because the court ruled that it was like that man with no name character was just like an archetype that belonged to the public domain. So by like legal definition, it is not the same character, which also explains why actors appear like Lee Van Cleef's in the second and the third film, playing a completely different person. So, put that one to bed. But yeah, so the first film, great film, remake of Yojimbo by Akira Kurosawa. It sort of introduces Leone's style, his like grittier sort of approach to that Western. You get introduced to Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name, which is often parodied, often referenced. It's just like one of the iconic characters of cinema, even though it's a different character each time. But in fact, I mean, I'd go as far to say, really, it encapsulates that first film sort of. What's that? It sort of blew up. Obviously, it blew up Clint Eastwood's career as an actor, but also like his whole persona of the cool, tough guy. It all really stems from this film. So I'd say he rode the coattails of this film like for most of his life, really.
Still riding it.
Still is, absolutely. Still got that cool, tough guy thing going on, even though he's like 92 or something like that,
And still directing. He's got his last one at some point coming out in the near future, I think.
He's been saying, I think his last 5 have all been his last one. You know what I mean? It's been like Miyazaki sort of thing,
Yeah, status quo, your final tour was in the 80s, you're still touring, mate.
Yeah.
It gives me hope for Scorsese as he ages.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, he just made one of his best, if you ask me. So,
and it's realistically almost a Western.
Yeah, it is.
There you go, yeah. I was thinking of that. Yeah, absolutely.
So is Casino, by the way.
Interesting. Okay. I'll rewatch it with that in mind. So, yeah, second one for a few dollars more. I'd say it's more violent, got an even more engaging story. The final duel, especially, is like fantastic. I think it's much more emotional than anything in that first film. So I think it really, to me, it's sort of if the first film was Leone sort of trialing some ideas, testing his style, this is him really cementing it down and being like, this is my Western, this is my vision of the West. And I think it's fantastic. You obviously get introduced to, I've made some notes, so if it looks like I'm reading, I am. You get introduced to Lee Van Cleef in this film, who appears in the next film as well. And once you see him, you just sort of think, yeah, that makes sense. That's this man should exist in this world. He's so striking. His eyes, obviously, the main thing that you see.
He's a side grunt in Liberty Valance, which I found funny.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. He should be the leader every time, But I think that, again, one of Leone's sort of trademarks, if you will, is him casting people just based on their look, which obviously I'm sure with Lee Van Cleef, there was much more going on, like it was his skill as an actor. But a lot of the extras are just sort of random people he could find that just have that look. So that's why so many extras look so striking. And I think if you made a collage of all like the extras in a Leone film, it would look like a cartoonist sort of impression of somebody. I think that not to comment on anyone's appearance, but they're very striking. I'll say that. But yeah, this leads into sort of the most popular of his films, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which would probably be, I'd say, the most popular Western or the most well known. If the search is the most important, I'd say this might be the most popular.
Certainly, when you think of the sound of a Western, you
absolutely,
think of this.
Yeah.
And it's not like we've discussed this recently.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying not to go over any points you made, but absolutely.
Oh, go for it. Steal everything, please.
Well, I mean, with all these films, Ennio Morricone's soundtrack is just as iconic as any of the visuals, I'd say, and obviously for The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, you've got that main theme with the varying instruments to represent each character. I think a lot of people, you were saying when you discuss soundtracks and you're talking about Jaws, that people sort of know the Jaws theme music before they know Jaws. I'd say this is another one, because certainly I think I'd heard this in stuff like The Simpsons and stuff before I'd even seen The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, before I'd even heard of that. So that just goes, just tells you how sort of popular and ingrained into pop culture this film is. And finally on the soundtrack as well, The Ecstasy of Gold, which is probably one of the best pieces of music ever written for a film.
Yeah.
That scene that plays when Tuco's running around the cemetery when he first gets there, paired with that music, is just a beautiful. It's my favorite scene ever in anything. But again, that is just Ennio Morricone firing on all cylinders. Absolutely, so good. But yeah, so The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. What can I say that hasn't been said already? It is, I think, where for a few dollars more, sort of, Leone doubles down on what he wants his style to be. I think this goes beyond that. I think in terms of scope, it feels like so he made the films like a year apart, but honestly, it feels like there's 10 years between this one and the last one. It's obviously much longer. It like clocks in around 3 hours, and there's like a lot more going on in terms of the plot. But it's just like the bridge scene. If you've seen it, there's a bridge that gets blown up. Like just the sheer scale and scope of that. That's like, I think for any studio to let a director do that, they had to have a huge amount of faith, and perhaps they're a bit more lenient in Italy than I think anyone would be in America in that time in terms of Hollywood. So it just really like levels up in every single way. And that one scene with the bridge is fantastic. It's actually, so they blew it up accidentally initially, and the cameras weren't filming. So obviously, like, Leone was furious. I think he fired some of the crew who were responsible for it. I think what had happened is someone accidentally said down the radio, blow it up or something, but they didn't mean yet or something like that. It's one of them sort of mishearing stories. So they had to rebuild the entire bridge. The person who was in charge of rebuilding it said to Leone, "I'll only rebuild it if I can get that crew that you just fired back." So they came back. No one lost their job in the end. But then they did it for the second time, and obviously that's what was caught on camera. One of the best scenes in the movie. But yeah, I'm trying to sort of going all over the place in my notes. So, like I said, that scene is one of the best scenes in the film, but it's also a film. Every time I rewatch it, I get to a bit and go, "Oh, this is my favorite bit." Then the next scene plays, and it's like, "Oh no, this is my favorite bit." Oh, the next scene. Oh no, this bit. It's got so many iconic scenes, so many amazing moments. You've got the desert stuff earlier on when Tuco is sort of dragging Clint Eastwood's. He's called Blondie in this film. Is dragging him through the desert, and I've never seen anyone look so dry and like without moisture at all.
For me, it's Tuco. It's anything with Eli Wallach, I think, is a highlight for me, because I think of the three, he's the most interesting, the most nuanced.
I would agree.
He's just so much fun to watch as well.
He really is. Yeah. So
I think
Eli Wallach.
He's really the protagonist of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
I would agree with that. 100%. I think because he gets the most fleshed out as well. There's that scene where he visits his brother, who's become a priest. And you sort of see how like they've grown up together, but they've completely split it off separately. I think that really does have like an effect on Tuco. Even though he's called the Ugly, I think he's probably the most human, really. But yeah, that's Eli Wallach. That's probably, I haven't seen him in too much else, but the best I've ever seen him. I think is the heart and soul of that film, really. And yeah, to sum up to round out the three main cast, the three roles, you've got Clint Eastwood as the good, which again, speaking to that, how the spaghetti western differs to the American western, he's the good, but he's still like a bounty hunter. He's still a criminal, like straight up, you know. You got the bad Lee Van Cleef, who, if you ever wanted someone to personify just crude evil, you know, just look at him in the all black with the splintering eyes like that. That's just perfect casting, you know. And then again, you got the ugly, which is Tuco, played by Eli Wallach, who is probably the best character in the film. But I think I've gone out of order on my notes. It's so silly of me.
You took
I'd say,
notes. That's more than most of us do.
Well, there you go. I just knew because I'd forget something, you know. Obviously, we spoke about the searches and that sort of iconography, where you've got the famous doorway shot. There's obviously a lot of that in here as well. I think the Mexican standoff at the end, when you've got, it starts very wide and moves in closer with like the eye shots. You go around all three of the protagonists. But I think there's stuff like that which is leans into how visual Leone is as a director. And again, that you could say that's all down to the music. He likes the music. He wants to incorporate the music, so he didn't need dialogue. But I just think you could honestly play the film on silent or take all the dialogue out, and it would still work. You'd still get that basic understanding of the plot, which, like, I think Hitchcock says. Like, there's a quote about Hitchcock where he says his films are like silent films or something like that. But in the first 10 minutes, like, of this film, nobody speaks. It's pure just visual storytelling, and it works. And I think that's just Leone's style for such a visual director.
Yeah, in comparison, a lot of like Ford's detail is in the landscape, the land, the sky, and sort of represent the freedom of the frontier. And when he does have the close-ups, like, they're very striking. So much of the character interactions have that classic Hollywood technique where it's shot from like medium shot, knee, waist up. And it really works well in The Searchers because, like, he could do transitions with characters moving through the frame. He doesn't have to use cuts, scene changes. He can keep things rolling but also progressing visually. And I do love how Leone uses like the tighter shots and I think captures the Western in a more intimate way.
I'd agree with that, absolutely. As I remember when I was sort of getting into spaghetti westerns for the first time, I found a really great video essay on YouTube, which I don't remember who it was by, I don't remember the name of it. But I'm only saying that just so it doesn't look like I've copied their point. But they would always say, like, what exists is only within the frame. So anything outside the frame doesn't exist for Leone. It's literally just what you can see. And that's why when Tuco and Blondie are walking, I forget after which part, but I think it's after the camp. It's just before they get to the bridge, and they're walking, and then all of a sudden, like, they're just surrounded by these soldiers. And then the camera pans out, you see the soldiers, and then you see the whole bridge, and there's an entire base there. And it's like, how did they miss that? But it's because Leo's only concerned with what's happening in frame. And I think it's like you say, it's a much more intimate portrayal in that sense,
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's like a visual like way to express internal reality is there's nothing else there. It's literally just what you're saying.
That. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
I've also a lot of, so I was going to say this point about spaghetti westerns in general, but I'll say it about this film. It's very, I get the impression that Hollywood westerns very meticulous, very planned out. With the spaghetti western, it seems that they turn up on the day and they're like, oh yeah, we'll just do this. It's very unplanned, very dangerous in that sense. So, for example, in relation to this film specifically, there's a scene where Tuco is in the like gun shop and he's like trying out all the different guns and just like going through them all. And like the poor guy behind the counter is terrified of him. He just thinks he's an absolute psycho opposite him, which is correct. But on that day of shooting, they told Eli, well, like, oh, so you know what you're doing? And he's like, well, not really. I don't know anything about guns. And they're like, oh, just pick them up and spin this. Just look like you know what you're doing. So literally that scene where he's like looking at all these different guns, and going like, oh yeah, okay, doesn't know what he's doing. He's never handled a gun. He's just literally just whatever feels right in the moment. And also at the end of that scene, there's the bit where he shoves during the open close sign on the shop door. He shoves that into the store owner's mouth. That was just like Eli Wallach did that, just unprompted. He just thought, I'll end it this way, and they were just like, that's great, we'll keep that. So awesome. There's a lot of stuff like that in the film, which it sounds silly to be like, oh yeah, the films are unplanned. It's like a bad idea as a filmmaker. But it just works. It completely, I think, captures that grittiness, that realism as well, which I was on about earlier. It just absolutely, like I say, works. I think I've covered most of my notes there.
So that's great.
How would you rank the Dollars Trilogy from favorite to third favorite?
I think for me, they get better as they go along. So I'd say Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is the best. For a few dollars more, number 2, and then A Fistful of Dollars at number 1. But we were saying before the show, I think a lot of people underrate the second one. Yeah. Because I think the first one's like iconic because it's the first to do that, and you're introduced to that world and Clint Eastwood's character. And then the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is obviously the more iconic one. And that middle one sometimes not forgotten, just like not spoken about enough. It is really good.
I'd probably say For a Few Dollars More is my favourite.
Absolutely.
I get why kind of Good, Bad, Ugly is kind of held up as like the kind of the epitome of kind of everything that's great in that trilogy. Because it's like, as you were saying, it's Leone kind of learning his craft and gradually refining it. As the decade goes on. So they're all stunning.
Yeah, I like that it maintains the simplicity, but it does feel like an improvement, and it's been a while since I've seen that one versus the first one, third one. So,
okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I just remember my impression of watching it, going like, I love this. This is the best.
Yeah, it is great. It's like I say, like it's more emotional as well. I think it's got probably the best story out of all of them with Lee Van Cleef's character. And sort of the reveal at the end of why he's been doing all he's been doing and stuff. I think it's really good stuff.
Nice. And as I continue to stall for Kieran,
so Kieran's the latest of us to get computer gremlins. So my camera come back, but his whole system's just died on him. So I think I'll be going next one.
But one last question to see if he'll show up. What is your favorite non-Leone spaghetti western, guys?
Ooh, I'd say the Great Silence for me.
Oh,
which is...
you took mine.
I'm so sorry. It's great.
I'm getting into Corbucci on the back of Quentin Tarantino's podcast. So I got those.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Same, you could say Il Gran Silencio. I mean,
I could say,
you could, yeah. Klaus Kinski in that, I think, is one of my favorite performances in any film. He's great.
Yeah,
completely unhinged sort of guy.
Yeah,
agreed.
I mean, look, I love the Big Gun Down. I love Django. Hey, there's Kieran. But really, I think like The Hateful Eight, it's not spaghetti western, but it is, and like it's The Great Silence. I haven't seen that, but that is my impression of it, and I love The Hateful Eight, and I feel it's underappreciated within his filmography.
When I first saw Great Silence, I can't remember whether it's I think it might have been towards the end of last year, I think. But it was nice to kind of watch something and think, oh, that's where Tarantino nicks that from. It's like
especially
he kind of worshipped Corbucci. I mean, there was a good Netflix documentary. I think it's called The Other Sergio, but it's about Corbucci and just about how basically he rates him higher than Leone. He's had more. I think he's had more impact on his kind of career and his style overall.
All right, Kieran is here. Tell us about a horror director who directed a Western in Italy. Oh, assuming you're not frozen.
Oh, dear.
And I'm still, it's dodgy. Sorry to anyone listening backwards. Like the router went down and had to be rebooted, so it's probably still resetting and solidifying itself. So have we gone through your pick, Sam? Or
No.
are we straight on to
No, not yet. So, I mean, I was gearing myself up to
take
go
over?
on.
Okay.
But no, it's fine. You go.
If anyone wants any proof that this is live,
Give us your spiel before you cut out again.
okay. So where did you finish off, George, on the spaghetti westerns? Because this kind of takes off from that.
Okay. We just sort of spoke about the Dollars Trilogy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, realistically, my pick is probably one of the out the walls on. I don't even if anyone else has seen it. It's called 4 of the Apocalypse.
I have not seen it. So.
By Lucio Fulci, the man behind many a giallo and eventual kind of zombie film. So if anyone knows their Italian cinema from the 70s and schlock Italian cinema will know Fulci. He did things like Don't Torture a Duckling. He went on to do things like The Beyond, the 7 Notes in Black, which Tarantino used the main theme for, I think, the trailer for Kill Bill Volume 1. Zombie Flesh Eaters is well known for zombie versus shark fight, which is great. For about 3 minutes. It's just like, I like Dawn of the Dead, I like Jaws all together. And it was well known for a kind of ambivalence of why does Argento get all the praise and I get nothing? And eventually they kind of half collaborated before his death in '96. But yeah, so the 4 of the Apocalypse comes out in 1975, and it is Italian, so I guess we could classify it as a spaghetti western. And yet, it is possibly one of the most un-Western westerns in terms of the traditional narrative Western that you will ever come across, because there are no Indians. There is a bad guy that eventually gets killed, but there's not one like that kind of starts and ends and that kind of thing. It's more of a kind of road trip through a post kind of golden age Western kind of landscape. And you were saying earlier how kind of the good guys are no longer kind of the stereotypical good guys. Your main character, who's, I want to say his name is Stubby, and I've completely forgotten now. Stubby. He's dressed he's got the white hat and a white cloak, but he's a card cheat. And one of the first things is the sheriff arrests him. And he goes through his bag and burns all these packs of cards that have been carefully marked over months and months, and burns them away and puts him in jail with what is now going to become the 4 of the Apocalypse. You've got Stubby, who's a card cheat. You've got Bunny, who is a pregnant prostitute. You have Bud, who is he's a gentler kind of black man, but communicates with the dead. Is it hallucinating or not? And then you have the drinker, Clem, who's just constantly just like drunk and just craving whiskey and everything. And after they're kind of the town they're in of Salt Flat gets kind of massacred with this sheriff that really doesn't care and is like, yeah, they'll reset the town. It's getting awful, and we can restart it. The 4 of them are kind of set free into this wilderness, and it's kind of just this going through this hellish kind of landscape, as it were, meeting people along the way that kind of, they meet a load of the kind of the pilgrims that are going through to find somewhere, and later on, they say kind of what did they say? There's a smash cut. One of them says the party's over now as they leave, and the next thing you see is kind of the field on fire with these people kind of ravaging the place. And then a man called Chaco turns up, and he's hunting, and he initially seems good, but eventually kind of convinces Clem, who's the drinker, to tie up the others so that this guy Chaco, who apparently inspired part of his design off Manson, apparently Manson had a swastika on the forehead, and he did his design kind of crosses under the eyes, and convinces Clem to tie up the characters so that he can go and rape Bunny, the prostitute character, and it all just goes downhill from there. They end up in Clem eventually tries to go against Chaco, but he's kind of shot in the leg. And there's a lot of kind of walking of him passing away and raving mad as he eventually dies in this kind of ghost town that's there. They leave Bud there because he's kind of communicating with the spirits of the dead in the graveyard, and he finds some meat for them to eat. And then Stubby looks around, and it turns out that he's essentially cut the thigh and the buttock off the dead body of Clem and gone, yeah, we have meat. They go on, and then eventually Bunny gives birth in this town of kind of this new town, all these people there in the snowy wilderness that was filmed in Austria. But it's very, very silent and white, and by the end of the film, the finale is Stubby meeting back up Chaco, who kind of tied them up and raped Bunny earlier. He's now all in black. He's got a black hat, he's got a black cloak, and you've had this really kind of desolate, again, almost apocalyptic kind of Western going through. There's almost no life. It's darkness everywhere. The pilgrims, they eventually meet back up again, are now dead and shot. And Stubby eventually kind of has his revenge right at the very end and kind of trots off. But normal Westerns, this would be kind of, we return home victorious and we've killed the bad guys and everything's good again. But there's not that. It's very isolated. I think a dog comes up and kind of goes off with him. But there's none of this kind of, hurrah, the day has been saved. This is a Western where the tone is completely different throughout the entire thing. Fulci, a couple of years earlier, had started putting a lot of gore in his films, and a lot of the stuff is very violent. Westerns typically didn't do that. And horror movies get a bad rap for having kind of the amount of death and stuff. Have you seen the early Westerns? Just bang, 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 bang. Well, that's like a whole horror movie's worth of people dead in about
just
3
off
seconds.
Screen because of the motion picture production code.
Yeah, and about a decade earlier, people like Sam Peckinpah and the Wild Bunch and things like that were starting to look at the violence and go, this is not the clean-cut stuff that we thought it was. And this film really ties into that. There's 1 or 2 scenes that were kind of actually never released in the US initially. So on the release that I got out of the University Library, the scenes that have been re-added in for the first time haven't been dubbed over. They're still with the Italian subs. So, for a Western, they're cutting stuff out because it's too violent. And this isn't like now. This is the 70s. What's going on? And this is Italy as well. Italy's fine with violence. This is what Rome started in Italy. They're fine with violence. It's nothing new. So for them to do that really shows kind of, I think, the direction that it's going. And yet, despite this, Fulci, again, known for kind of his horror pictures, his crime pictures, there's stuff in it which is really quite beautiful. There are these beautiful kind of long shots. It's a lot more heartfelt, a lot more kind of almost mournful than a lot of his other films. And you do have these moments. There's a beautiful moment when Bunny's giving birth, and you've got outside all these people, this kind of company that have ridden into this town that's kind of deserted, and they're using it, and it's all men. There's like 30 or 40 of them, and they're exchanging money. Do we think it's going to be a girl or a boy? You're going to make money out of this, all this, and they're kind of going around. And then they hear Bunny kind of crying, and they all stop, and it's in this blanket of snow, and then you hear a baby's crying, and the camera just pans out, and it's really slow. It's kind of the only kind of good moment that you get of it, and it's really kind of there's no violence, there's no fun guts. It's just a load of men standing in the snow going, we have a new life among us. And for once there's a glimmer of hope there, which is kind of undercut eventually when Stubby kind of rides on. It's kind of, they kind of expect him to take care of the child, but he kind of rides on going, you guys are more kind of, going to be better with you. They even name him Lucky, and he rides on. So I think it's a really interesting film for the fact, just tonally, you have the iconography. There's people on horseback. There's guns, and gunfights on occasion and that. but it's a very nihilistic Western, completely through tonally. Yes, there's a violence, but it's more just kind of the kind of, what are we doing to ourselves almost. And yet there are these just moments of almost unfulchy, moments. There's moments where two of the characters kind of get together, and there's beautiful like sunbeams streaking in, and there's just this counterpointed by really nice visual moments. Of course, with Fabio Frizzi's score underneath it, Fulci's frequent collaborator on things like Zombie Flesh Eaters and The Beyond and that. So I just thought it was a really interesting like trade up on the Western, where it's not kind of a quest almost, a kind of quest. A bad guy kind of appears and comes through it, but that's not the idea. It literally just is for people almost just trying to survive and seeing where the world takes them, and the world just kind of beats everything down. And so this four of the apocalypse aren't kind of the four horsemen springing death. They are kind of just four in the apocalypse almost. And it's really nihilistic. And I think, again, 75. So Westerns are kind of starting to wind down at this point. They're less prevalent as it goes on. And it's just a really interesting kind of statement on where the genre is at the time. And again, I think Fulci considered it his masterpiece, and it is probably one of the least schlocky. As much as I love Fulci, some of his stuff is just like, really, this is just pointless.
It sounds like there's still a fair bit of pain and suffering and mutilation in it, though.
Yeah, the gunfight at the start, when they get hit by blood, the gunshots, there is blood. But at the same time, it's not just constant head getting chopped off. There's moments, but I think it's more an overall tone of just kind of this grey, dull, bleak.
Is it a psychological Western, Kieran?
You're saying it, not me. I refuse to.
I was asking. I was not saying.
I'm going to say no. Yes, because psychological Westerns implies that other Westerns don't interrogate the main characters, which is just stupid. In the same way that elevated horror implies that things like, normal slasher films don't have themes and ideas to them. It's just stupid ideas. But it is a more thoughtful Western. It's not just a gung-ho, let's kill the Indians and save the girl. We save the girl, hey, kind of thing. It is completely different. It's more of a kind of road trip almost through the wasteland and the people they meet there, and the kind of the bleakness that happens. And it doesn't end nicely. It just ends with the character kind of riding off to lands unknown. What he's going to do then, we don't know, but he's definitely changed. And I think it's interesting that right at the very end, his kind of victory are kind of the first kills that he makes throughout it. And he almost feels like he feels it. It feels a bit like Joker that would be in Full Metal Jacket. The first person he kills is the sniper right at the end, and you feel the weight of that, and it is a weighty film from that sense. But yeah, it's one of those, because it's Fulci, it will go completely under the radar of pretty much everyone. And I just thought it was interesting as the spaghetti western, but at the end of kind of the spaghetti westerns, and as it is, and everything's kind of winding down, and it almost feels like it is a thing of the genre winding down.
Yeah, it's kind of at the very, very peak different of the decline, for sure. Yeah,
and it's just tonally very, very different. And I'd seen it years ago a couple of times and watched it again, and just there are certain things I remembered. And yeah, this is actually a very bleak film. It's just that hanging overtone, which I think is very, very different, especially from your 30s and 40s Western, even something like The Searchers. I think this is much more, just dour film than that, but still, but for all the kind of moments of schlock, it is still very kind of poignant and striking regardless. So, if my internet drops off now, I've done my piece.
Sam, for your movie, would you say it's pretty different from what you've heard so far, or sort of in a similar vein?
Yeah, similar vein, but it's very consciously knows what it's referring to, I think. So this is The Good, the Bad, and the Weird from 2008 by Kim Ji-woon. And if the title wasn't clear enough, this is basically an East Asian take on The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Much like Sukiyaki Western Django kind of nodded to Sergio Corbucci's original Django film. You guys did cover a Sukiyaki Western Django.
Yes, we did.
The early days of the podcast before me.
Yeah.
BS before Sam.
Yes, indeed. But yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, kind of in our kind of preamble, really, the East and the West have kind of been swapping ideas, story ideas and ideas of iconography, kind of what makes a memorable image in cinema, since film's been around, basically, going from cowboys to samurai, back to samurai again. Cowboys to samurai to back to cowboys. And maybe another samurai thrown in there at some point. One thing I kind of picked up with this, because it transposes events to Manchuria in 1939. So this is the area of China that was occupied by the Japanese. Just before the outbreak of World War II, the decade leading up to it, anyway. And it described the film is described in its own credits as an Oriental Western. So it's using those kind of the Western kind of iconography, the kinds of visuals, the way the characters dress and act and everything like that, but obviously in a very Eastern setting and a specific time and place. One thing that kind of came to me a bit more as I was rewatching this is westerns, classic westerns. They normally have war either on the horizon or in the recent past. Like a lot of early westerns, they're around the time of the Civil War, or during or just after it, and they often kind of follow people who've been displaced by conflicts and opportunists, who are basically just seek to get rich quick off suffering of others. So The Good, the Bad, and the Weird kind of swaps out the American Civil War and the frontier territories for the looming Second World War and China and Korea under Japanese occupation, basically. So, so set Manchuria in 1939, and we follow a thief played by Song Kang-ho, who is the Weird, who comes into possession of a valuable treasure map, and in doing so attracts the attention of a mob enforcer played by Lee Byung-hun, who's the bad, and a bounty hunter played by Jung Woo-sung, who's the good. So they are the same kind of character archetypes, basically filling the same purpose as The Good, Bad, the Ugly, in Leone's film. And the film largely follows kind of the same general plot beats, but they kind of it goes a bit more off the beaten track towards the end. I say it goes a lot darker, kind of as things revelations start to happen towards the end. The Weird character, Song Kang-ho's character, he gets to some much darker place than Eli Wallach ever did, I think. I'm not going to spoil exactly what his kind of backstory is, but let's just say his kind of Chaplin-esque kind of physical comedy routine is a bit of a red herring, really. He may be more than meets the eye. But the other two characters, the enforcer and the bounty hunter, they're basically the same as Lee Van Cleef's and Clint Eastwood's characters, really, from Good, Bad, the Ugly. It was written and directed by Kim Ji-woon, who's one of my favorite Korean directors. After Bong Joon-ho and Park Chan-wook, he's well known for Tale of Two Sisters, Bittersweet Life, and I Saw the Devil. And for me, he's one of the really great 21st century kind of action directors. Even when he does stuff clearly for the paycheck, like his only Hollywood film so far, which The Last Stand with Arnie, which we talked about in our pilot episode for this. That I don't think ever made it to air, did it? It never went out, did it? No. Okay.
No.
So I think even when he does stuff like that, he makes even mediocre stuff look really cool, really exciting. He uses a lot of the way his action kind of geography of like an action scene, and how he choreographs everything and puts everything together, and just the rhythm and kick-ass kind of moments, that kind of you can take in. Nothing's like hidden in the edit. It's not like shaky cam and kind of too cutting too fast that you can't see what's going on. They're really kind of elaborate kind of sequences, and you really get to kind of really get into them and appreciate like kind of all the effort that's going into them. I mean, the opening to this, it's like it's on a train, and the Weird is kind of just working his way on the train, just trying to basically rob everything he can, and then get his kind of valuable cargo in the end carriage, while the bad kind of is coming on after him, looking for the same thing, and then the good turns up on horseback, then gets off the train. They're all shooting at each other on various parts of the train, falling off, jumping back on again, and riding around. It's really cool. There's a latest fight in like in this kind of slum of like this Dust Bowl town, and there's this big shootout going on the ground, and then the Good at one point just he does almost like a Jack Sparrow. He like hooks onto a crane and kind of pulls up in the air and flies around, all the while shooting his rifle one-handed at the guys like spinning around him. So there's some really kind of cool stuff like that.
Now I need to see if there's Bollywood westerns, because I'm sure there's way cooler stuff.
There will be. I'm absolutely 100% sure there
Even
are.
if they're just Bollywood remakes of other ones.
Another thing I found quite interesting about this is there's a almost Quentin Tarantino-esque kind of joke that goes on in the early stage of this. So, do you remember that scene in Inglourious Bastards? That really long, drawn-out opening scene, mostly in French. With Hans Lander obviously interrogating that farmer, and then about halfway he says, "Do you mind if we complete this conversation in English?" Because basically that's like Tarantino saying, "Right, I've had enough writing this in kind of stilted French. I want to do my kind of dialogue kind of flourishes now." And there's a similar thing on this with the Weird kind of. So he's on this train. So it's obviously in China. So it's mostly kind of a Chinese kind of congregation in the train, but there's obviously some Japanese soldiers and officers as well, kind of keeping an eye on things and traveling through. And he's trying to threaten like this carriage full of Chinese people and Japanese soldiers, and none of them speak Korean, of course, because it's a Korean film. The main character's Korean, and he's trying like various ways to threaten them, and just sort of like, "Don't you speak any Korean at all?" He goes, "Fine," and they kind of just breaks like stilted like Mandarin, I think. And then has a bit of Japanese as well, but then just reverts back to it. So it's highlighting, this is these people are getting kind of out of place. They're Koreans in China, occupied by Japan, and nothing quite fits. But it's almost like a commentary on like this period of kind of history in East Asia, just how all these kind of cultures kind of tripping over each other and trying not to be, displaced and wiped out, by invading forces.
It also fits the hodgepodge of nationalities that Leone would work with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And even Fulci, it was a time when the several of the main cast are speaking English, but his main actor is speaking Italian, and they dub over the English part, and then for the English speaking ones they dub it over as well. So welcome to Italy, where they dub over the other half. As
it's known, just standard practice in Italy.
Yeah.
I won't say what this treasure map that everyone's fighting over. I won't spoil exactly what it leads to, because that's a big thing in the final act. But I say it isn't gold. They're not after gold, but none of them actually know what it's for. They should know something valuable is there, and they're off to get it.
Was the true gift of knowledge by any chance?
The true gift was all the people they shot along the way.
I was going to say, they don't turn up in an alien spaceship, do they? Have to go through a temple somewhere.
Not quite, no. So obviously it's a very kind of self-aware kind of film about what it's referencing and why it's referencing it, but it's putting like a different kind of cultural slant on things, and using it to comment on a specific moment in a culture's history, but using like established conventions of like an American genre film, which I found quite interesting. And it's just an absolute riot. It's just so much fun. It's like being a Korean film. Yes, it is over 2 hours, but only just. It's about 2 hours 10, I think. But it doesn't waste a moment, and it just doesn't stop. It just keeps the momentum going, and all the characters are just so entertaining. There's some really cool shots, and you know how Leone and especially Corbucci kind of try to introduce more kind of violent elements into kind of Western filmmaking. Well, Kim Ji-woon being Kim Ji-woon goes a lot further.
I think just South Korea being South Korea goes a lot further.
Yeah. It's like they do the three-way kind of standoff at the end, like the Mexican standoff, the Korean Mexican standoff, the Korean Mexican standoff in China, occupied by Japan. So confusing.
The international standoff.
Yeah, they do that scene at the end. But it basically goes almost the same way that it goes in Good, Bad, the Ugly. But then people get up again and they have another go, and they're shooting bits off each other, and they just keep hitting each other's holes. It just keeps going and going and going, which is fun. Apparently, that there is another cut of this, a slightly different ending, which I haven't actually seen. The international ending is the one that Kim Ji-woon preferred, but apparently for the Korean audiences, they wanted something a bit more upbeat. So basically, not spoiler, they all end up kind of ambiguously down to the count. Basically, I think you basically meant to read they all do die of blood loss eventually. They for the Korean audience, because Song Kang-ho was such a celeb at that point, who's such a popular figure, they thought, oh, he can't die. So yeah, they give him an out in the Korean version of the film. Apparently, it's basically says what V does at the end of V Vendetta. Basically, there's some hidden armor on his costume, basically. But yeah, it's an interesting one, and I think it's a good kind of companion piece to kind of the spaghetti western kind of stuff, which obviously Kim Ji-woon must be a kind of a big fan of. And it's just turned that well-known kind of iconography in a slightly different direction, and kind of further revising it, to tell a recognisable but different enough kind of story. So,
obviously, going to comment on the South Korean trend. Obviously, in Parasite, the ending again with Song Kang-ho, them as the Indians and the hunters, things like that. Where again, that's using the iconography for something else to make a point, which I think kind of shows at this point how ingrained just worldwide the idea of the Western is, even if we don't use it, in the same way anymore.
Yeah. All right. So, Sam, what do you think is like the most important element of the evolution of the Western in The Good, the Bad, and the Weird?
Well, I think it's about looking back, appreciating what's come before, and kind of what people love about these films, but maybe puncturing the myth a little bit, or using the myth to kind of redirecting it to tell a kind of a new story, or a new take on a well-worn story. I think it's almost like the legends can kind of be applied to I suppose any culture, any kind of story, within reason. The iconography is almost like it's like a shortcut, for these kind of mythological. Okay, now I'm going to stumble over it. Mythologized characters.
Mythologized. That's how you say it. I couldn't think of it.
We're well done. Yeah, it's where you put the emphasis into
what he said.
And, yeah, I mean, when you get to like, obviously we've had a lot of the Western genre as it was. As I think we've already said, it kind of doesn't exist with anymore without with a few notable exceptions. You get one once in a while, but films that use kind of the Western iconography do, and kind of like No Country for Old Men or Hell or High Water, films like that. They are contemporary crime dramas, but they're kind of using that kind of iconography. So I think it's a genre that will keep kind of feeding kind of new takes on all kinds of films, for kind of decades to come, and that'll keep kind of spreading around the world, and different countries will have these their own takes on these stories, and these aren't your granddad's westerns anymore, but.
Well, and
there are elements in them all still that would be recognisable to your granddad.
Another international western that I would recommend. It's a weird western called Bacurau from Brazil.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fun. And then I meant to mention this in my segment, but there's an Inuit remake of The Searchers, or adaptation, however you want to look at it. It stars exclusively Indigenous people, and it's called Searchers, or in their language, it's romanized as Malagluit, something like that. So check out that one too.
Yeah,
if you can type it.
Yeah, I would also recommend. I mean, again, it's kind of English language, but kind of another culture's take on the Western. I would also recommend The Proposition, the Australian Western. From about 15 years ago. That was again using the familiar iconography, and it's a lot like something like Unforgiven, I suppose. It's a quite bleak one, and kind of quite aware of the kind of story it's telling, and what it's doing with the tropes. But again, there's enough in it to kind of make it really interesting, and it uses the Australian culture and the outback landscapes really effectively.
I was going to say, and I'm on that thing, am I allowed to mention the Nightingale once again?
Of course.
Yeah, sure.
Just my love for Jennifer Kent.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically a Western, isn't it?
It's a rape revenge film with a Western Tasmanian backdrop in it. So, and obviously for the most recent Western possibly out there, Killers of the Flower Moon.
Absolutely.
George, do you have any?
I'd recommend Dead Man, which is the Jim Jarmusch film from '95, I believe. It's revisionist Western, but I think it's called like an acid Western, which I'm not too sure how to define that. But it is really good. It's got an amazing soundtrack by Neil Young, and it does a lot of things that, like Jim Jarmusch does in general with all his films. Very against the grain, not what you'd expect. Sort of, if it's any climax really goes out with a whimper then a bang, Very, it subverts a lot of expectations of that genre. But I thought it was fantastic, so I'd recommend that.
I was going to say, what comes after a revisionist Western? Because if you have enough of them, this just becomes another phase, and the Western.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Acid is like, what does that mean,
So what's next? Do we have the postmodernist Western, or just the iconographical Western, where we just use the images for
demythology?
I hope not, because I can't say that.
This is obviously what the Film Magazine and Second Cut is going to contribute to film theory at some point. We're going to come up with what the new name for the Western is in the 21st century.
We need to take more strong stance on film theory as a group, I believe.
Yes, we do.
We can come up with some names that can be recycled on the internet and film Twitter forevermore.
Like elevated horror.
I mean, I've already got one that I will delve into at some point, and I will probably publish my critical theories on horror. But for Westerns, I haven't got one.
George, get on it.
We'll brainstorm something after the show.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
In about 3 weeks' time, we've woken up.
I guess that is going to do it for our discussion of Westerns. George, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I've loved it. Thank you.
Yeah, we needed a guiding actual intelligence here.
Someone who knows what he's talking
You picked the wrong guy. But
someone who writes notes.
A note taker.
Excuse me, I have notes. Thank you. Not very many. But
you're right. Kieran, I forgot about your notebook. R.I.P. that segment. By the way, one of my favorite things in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is when the flies are landing on Eli Wallach's face.
Oh, yeah.
I just saw one buzzing behind me, and it reminds me of how he's like, keep it in. I don't care.
It's like the grossest thing ever, but they just keep it in. It's amazing, you know?
Yeah. I guess it lends to like the gritty realism.
That's it.
Yeah, so that's it. So guys, if people want to find you online, where can they find you, George? You're the guest. We'll start with you.
On Twitter, X, whatever you call it.
Twitter.
I am at Mr. George Lax, MR George LAX. That's where I talk about films the most, really. Any work that I do for the film magazine will be promoted on there as well. And yeah, that's it, really. You know, for me.
George is our newsman at the film magazine. So when something happens,
he's on the ball.
I've got all them scoops, you know.
The antithesis.
I was very disappointed that you didn't come on with a hat with like little press cars in it, you know.
Nah, I knew I forgot something. But,
next time. It's his first time on. We'll let him off this time, but next time...
I do know who's being cast as the Fantastic Four, so, you know.
Who?
I can't tell you guys. I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Insider info. I'm sorry.
You do know if Coppola's going to actually get Megalopolis made, right?
He's hoping. He keeps saying he's going to do it.
All right.
Who's eventually directing Neuromancer?
Sam.
So when my camera's working, you can see me on this podcast if you so wish. But yeah, you can find me at SSP Thinks Film pretty much everywhere, and at the Film Magazine, where I have just this week reviewed the latest Marvel film, The Marvels. And you can look forward to updates to my two Marvel lists on the back of that as well. So there's a ranking of all 33 films now, and a ranking of all the villains that have caused superheroes so many problems over a decade and a half.
Speaking of Marvel, I'm very upset at the moment that I am not at the Abattoir Festival because tonight, I don't know whether it's over or not, they are, speaking of Marvel, they are doing the offside screening at a nightclub of Blade for the blood rave scene. And I was just like, I'm really upset I'm not going to that.
That's pretty cool.
Knowing them, they would, I half expected them to have been hiding behind the scenes with big water guns of red water just to start.
Surely it's got to get messy somehow.
Yeah. Well, like they threw little toy plushy blackbirds at us for the end of Terror at the Opera, where the ending is in the film they released a load of crows. So wouldn't be fascinating. Sorry, you're just marveling, reminding me. Have I got to discuss where I can be found now? Hopefully nowhere, if my internet works. But I am KJudgmental on Twitter. It's not X, it's Twitter, and the Grams and everywhere like that. On the site at the moment, hopefully at some point in the next few days there will be a review of an independent film called Embers coming out, which we had screening for. Tomorrow I am going to see Thanksgiving, the new Eli Roth slasher movie, because I've got to love me some slasher flicks, and Eli Roth is not the worst director in the world.
Haven't you not seen Hostel, Kieran?
Yeah, but I have seen Cabin Fever, so... And I will go back through and watch some of the others as well. And it's a slasher movie, so this is my bread and butter. And I'm not sure if I'd say it. I may or may not, depending on whether we get it in on time. Me and Joe could work it. I may or may not have a opinion piece analysis on Killers of the Flower Moon coming out, which I have a take which I have not found a single other person on the internet has, which I'm keeping secret. Genuinely an interpretation that I haven't found anyone else having. So it'll either go there or it'll go up on my blog, depending on if we can get it up in time.
Get it up fast before someone else has the same take.
Yeah, well, the first draft is written in about 1,700 words, so it's a decent analysis, but it's an interesting one. And I think that's everything for the moment. There may be stuff in the future, but probably not by the time the next podcast goes out.
Nice. Thank you, Kieran. And you can find me at Jacob Film Guy. I'm going to be updating my David Fincher ranked article with The Killer after I watch it tonight because I still haven't seen it.
You're useless with it. Like, oh yeah, I love all these modern American directors. The great stalwarts, and then they actually come out with stuff, and you're just like, I'm not bothering seeing. I was the first one of the three of us to go watch Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah, it's fair. That's not so bad. I mean, that's just on Netflix for whenever you want to get around to it. I still haven't seen Killers of the Flower Moon, so It's...
Yeah, and
to be honest, you could start it now and you'd still be watching it by the next podcast. It's a fairly lengthy film.
I'm focusing on the auteur Taylor Swift, so
okay, fair enough.
I watched the Reputation tour on Netflix.
Yeah. You've just got a friend for life in James there, Jacob.
Oh.
Best friends forever.
Thank you, James. Although my wife really kind of forced me to watch it, and I just sort of begrudgingly became a fan. So
you were just there.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe I'll write my Taylor Swift as an auteur piece, which I don't know if that's movie related technically because she's multimedia, primarily not film. But yeah. Yes, yet. So yeah. Oh, and I've failed to say you could find this podcast like at Second Cut Podcast. Usually just the pod part, though. I think TikTok wouldn't let me use that because they have weird rules. So, yeah, just look up Second Cut Podcast and we'll pop up wherever. I mean, you're already here, so, whatever. Go buy the merch at the Film Magazine on our Redbubble store. And if you don't want to take on material possessions, just give us money at our PayPal. Those are both linked below. And that is it. So, thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Thank you. Adios.
Thank you.